The ice between use. The frozen surface of Europa stretched endlessly before Dr. Maya Chen as she stared through the reinforced plasteel windows of Research Station Omega. Most people would see only a desolate wasteland in those endless fields of ice, but Maya saw beauty in every crystalline formation, every frozen ridge that sparkled under Jupiter's distant light. 6 months into her cryogenics research mission, she had grown accustomed to the isolation. The station's skeleton crew of 3 had dwindled to just her after the last supply shuttle departed early due to mechanical issues. Now, it was just her and the ice. The anomaly appeared on her scanners at 300 station time. At first, she thought it was another equipment malfunction. The extreme cold of Europa's surface played havoc with their sensors. But this signal was different. Metallic composition, geometric patterns too perfect to be natural, and most intriguingly, a power signature unlike anything in their database. "Control, this is Dr. Chen." She spoke into her comm unit, knowing the transmission would take almost an hour to reach Earth. "I'm picking up an unusual reading approximately 2 kilometers from the station. Requesting permission to investigate." She didn't wait for their response. By the time they received her message and replied, the object could be buried under another layer of ice. Maya was already suiting up in her thermal exploration gear, checking the seals on her suit with practiced efficiency. The surface trek was treacherous, even with the station's pathfinding beacons. Europa's ice shifted constantly, creating new crevices and pressure ridges without warning. Maya's boots crunched through the brittle surface layer as she followed her scanner's guidance. The object's energy signature grew stronger with each step. When she finally saw it, she stopped dead in her tracks. The ice had partially enclosed what was unmistakably a spacecraft, but not of human design. Its hull was composed of what appeared to be interlocking crystalline plates, reflecting the starlight in patterns that seemed to shift and move as she watched. "This is impossible," Maya whispered to herself, her breath fogging her helmet. Humanity had yet to detect any signs of intelligent alien life, yet here, buried in the ice of Europa, was proof that we weren't alone. Her scanner detected an opening, an airlock or entrance of some kind. The ship's power signature was weakening, fluctuating in a pattern that reminded Maya of a failing life support system. If there was anyone still alive in there, the decision to enter wasn't really a decision at all. As a scientist, her duty to knowledge outweighed her fear. As a human being, she couldn't ignore the possibility that someone needed help. The ship's entrance arised open at her approach, crystalline patterns spiraling outward like a blooming ice flower. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the same shifting patterns she'd observed on the hull. Her suit's thermometer registered temperatures far below even Europa's surface, nearly approaching absolute zero. In the ship's central chamber, she found them. Dozens of crystalline formations, each roughly humanoid in shape, arranged in what appeared to be cryogenic suspension pods. All but one were shattered, their occupants long since dead. The last pod pulsed with weak energy, and through its translucent surface, Maya could make out a figure. The being inside was breathtaking. Its body appeared to be composed of living crystal, faceted surfaces catching and refracting light in impossible ways. It was roughly humanoid, but with elongated limbs and features that seemed to flow like liquid glass. Maya's scanner indicated the pod was failing. Whatever power source had kept these beings in suspension was nearly depleted. Without thinking, she reached for the pod's control surface. The moment her gloved hand touched the crystal interface, the pod's surface became transparent, and the being's eyes snapped open. They were like diamonds catching fire, and they fixed directly on Maya with an intensity that made her step back. A voice filled her mind, not sound but pure thought, crystal clear and sharp as ice. "Human, your heat, it burns. But I need it. Help me, please." Maya's suit sensors screamed warnings. The temperature around her was dropping rapidly, far below even what her reinforced gear was designed to handle. The crystalline being was rising from its pod, movements fluid despite its seemingly solid form. "I am Kira," the thought voice continued. "My people are the Krillians. We require the cold to live, as your kind requires warmth. But now, something is wrong." Before Maya could respond, her suit's emergency system blared another warning. Not about the cold this time, but about heat. Station Omega's environmental systems were malfunctioning. The temperature was rising. "No!" Kyra's thoughts carried an edge of panic. "The heat. It will destroy me. Human. I need your help. But my touch could freeze you solid. Your warmth could shatter me. Yet without each other, we will both die." Maya's mind raced. The station's systems were failing, and she had a living alien crystalline being who needed temperatures cold enough to kill her instantly. Her suit wouldn't last long at these temperatures, and Kira couldn't survive the rising heat in the station. "My name is Maya," she finally said, her voice steadied despite her racing heart. "I'm a cryogenics researcher. If anyone can help you survive, it's me. But you'll have to trust me." Kira's crystalline form shifted, patterns of light moving beneath the translucent surface. Trust is not easy between species so fundamentally opposed. "But I have no choice. Show me your solution, Maya of Earth." As Maya led the way back toward the station, she couldn't help but smile despite the danger. She had dreamed of finding life out here in the void, but she never imagined it would be life that found the warmth of humanity itself to be its greatest threat, and perhaps its only hope. The real question was, how do you keep a being of living crystal alive in a warming station without freezing yourself in the process? Maya had a feeling she was about to put all her years of cryogenics research to the test in ways she never imagined possible. Behind her, Kira moved like flowing ice, leaving crystalline patterns in their wake. Two beings, their very natures opposed, now bound together by circumstance and survival. As they approached the station, Maya's mind was already working on the problem. She would find a way. She had to. Because that's what humans did. They solved the impossible problems, even if it meant rewriting the laws of thermodynamics themselves. The station's external lights flickered ominously as they approached, a visible sign of the failing systems within. Maya knew that beyond the immediate crisis, there were countless questions to be answered. Why were the Krillians here? What had happened to the others in those pods? But for now, survival came first. One step at a time, through the impossible cold and the threatening warmth, human and Krillian would have to find a way to coexist. Because in the end, that's what humanity did best. They adapted, they survived, and they helped others do the same, even if those others were beings of living crystal who found human warmth both deadly and essential. Frozen trust. The walk back to Station Omega became a delicate dance of distance. Maya led the way while Kira followed, maintaining a careful gap between them. Every few steps, frost would creep across Maya's suit sensors, warning her when the crystalline being drew too close. The station's external lights continued to flicker, each flash a reminder of the failing systems within. Your thermal regulation systems. Kyra's thoughts reached into Maya's mind, sharp and clear as Arctic wind. Why are they failing? Maya checked her tablet, scanning through the station's diagnostics. Something's overriding the environmental controls. The primary cooling systems are shutting down one by one. She paused, studying the readouts. This isn't random. Someone, or something, is deliberately warming the station. They reached the station's airlock, and Maya quickly coded in her emergency access sequence. As the outer door sealed behind them, she could see patterns of frost immediately forming on the walls around Kira, spreading like frozen flowers. The backup cryogenics lab, Maya said, her mind racing through options. It's 3 levels down, designed to maintain near absolute zero temperatures for my research. If we can reach it, I might be able to create a safe environment for you while I figure out what's happening to the station's systems. Your species. Kyra's thought voice carried a note of curiosity despite their dire situation. You are so fragile to the cold, yet you choose to work in it, to study it. Why? Maya led them through the station's corridors, checking her tablet constantly to monitor the rising temperatures. Humans are explorers. We're driven to understand things, especially the things that could kill us. Sometimes, the most dangerous environments hold the greatest discoveries. A sudden tremor shook the station, and warning klaxons began to blare. The temperature in the corridor jumped several degrees. Maya watched in horror as Kira's crystalline form began to shimmer, droplets of liquid forming on their surface. We need to move faster. Kira's thoughts now carried an edge of pain. But I must tell you why I am here, why my people came to this moon. The warmth that comes, it is not an accident. They reached the elevator that would take them to the lower levels, but Maya's access card was denied. The system was in lockdown. The emergency stairwell, she said, already moving. Tell me everything while we descend. As they made their way down the metal stairs, frost spreading wherever Kira touched, the alien story poured into Maya's mind. The Krillians were a peaceful species, having evolved in the void between stars where temperatures approached absolute zero. They had lived undisturbed for millennia, until they encountered the Pyraxians, beings of living plasma who consumed cold itself as energy. They hunt us, Kira explained, their crystalline form trembling as another wave of warmth washed through the station. They warm our worlds until we can no longer survive, then harvest our essence as we melt. Our ship carried the last of our kind, seeking refuge in the cold moons of your system. But they'd followed us. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The station's warming. They're here, aren't they? Yes. The single word carried centuries of fear and loss. They will not stop until they have consumed us all. They reached the level containing the cryogenics lab, but the security door was sealed. Maya's fingers flew over the keypad, trying override codes while checking her tablet. The temperature was still rising, now well above freezing. Kira, Maya said urgently, I need to interface directly with the lab's systems, but my tablet's frozen. Can you clear the ice without damaging it? The crystalline being moved closer, and Maya forced herself to remain still as Kira's alien form loomed over her. With precision that belied their alien nature, they drew the frost from the device, absorbing it into their own form. The tablet sparked to life, and Maya quickly connected to the lab's separate environmental system. I can override the door, but there's a problem. The lab's backup power is limited. Once we're inside, we'll only have about 6 hours before those systems fail too. 6 hours? Kira's thoughts were growing weaker, their crystalline form beginning to lose its sharp edges. Perhaps that is all we need. Your species, you understand both heat and cold. You adapt. Perhaps you can teach us to do the same. Maya finally cracked the door's security, and it slid open with a hiss of supercooled air. Inside, the laboratory was a marvel of human engineering, a space designed to study the very limits of cold itself. As Kira moved inside, their form immediately began to stabilize, the crystal patterns regaining their sharp clarity. But Maya knew they weren't safe yet. She sealed the lab's door and moved to the central control station, her mind already working on solutions. They needed to find a way to defeat beings made of living plasma, protect a creature of living crystal, and save the station, all while dealing with their fundamentally opposed biological needs. Your people, Maya said as she worked, they've never tried to fight back against the Pyraxians. We are beings of peace, Kira replied, their form now glowing with renewed strength in the extreme cold. We flee, we hide, we survive. But perhaps that is why we were drawn to your world. We sensed something in your species, a strength that goes beyond mere survival. Maya smiled behind her suit's faceplate as she pulled up the station's schematics. Well, you came to the right place. Humans have a long history of beating impossible odds, and we're particularly good at turning weaknesses into strengths. She turned to face the crystalline being, her mind already forming a plan. Your people may be peaceful, Kira, but humans, We've spent our entire history learning to fight smart instead of strong, and I think it's time we taught the Pyraxians a lesson about the true power of cold." As if in response to her words, the station shuddered again, and new warnings flashed across her screens. The Pyraxians weren't just coming. They were already here. The real question was, could a human scientist and a crystalline alien find a way to work together when their very natures were in opposition? Maya was about to find out, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. She had come to Europa to study the cold, and now she would have to use everything she knew about it to save not just herself, but perhaps an entire species. Sometimes, the universe had a strange way of testing human ingenuity. Melting point. The cryogenics lab's temperature monitors flashed warning after warning as heat began seeping through its reinforced walls. Maya's fingers flew across the control panel, rerouting power from non-essential systems to maintain the cold that Kira desperately needed. The crystalline beings stood in the center of the room, their form pulsing with an inner light that seemed to respond to the changing temperatures. They're inside the station. Kira's thoughts pierced Maya's mind, carrying images of beings made of living flame. The Pyraxians never sense just one hunter. They move in packs, like your Earth's wolves. Maya pulled up the station's internal security feeds on her screens. The cameras showed corridors filled with swirling, humanoid shapes that seemed to be made of pure plasma, their bodies casting an orange glow that distorted the air around them. Everywhere they passed, metal began to warp and bubble from the intense heat. 3 of them, Maya counted, her scientific mind already analyzing their movement patterns. They're methodically raising the temperature of each section, working their way down through the station. She turned to Kira. "Tell me everything you know about their physiology. There has to be a weakness." Kira's crystalline surface rippled, reflecting the blue emergency lights. They are beings of pure energy, surviving on thermal differentials. The greater the temperature difference they can create, the more power they can harvest. That is why they hunt us. Our natural cold state provides them with maximum energy when they consume us. A new alarm blared through the lab. The station's main reactor was overheating, its cooling systems compromised. Maya estimates they had less than 3 hours before catastrophic failure. "Your technology," Kara continued, moving closer despite the danger their cold presented to Maya. "It relies on balance, the interaction between heat and cold. We never developed such understanding because we only knew the cold. But the Pyraxians, they only know heat." Maya's eyes widened behind her faceplate as an idea began to form. "That's it," she whispered. "They've never had to adapt to rapid temperature changes. They seek out extremes, but what happens if we force them to deal with both at once?" She pulled up the station's environmental control systems, what was left of them. Most were locked out or destroyed, but there was still one card left to play. The emergency plasma vents, designed to release superheated plasma from the reactor core in case of a meltdown, could be redirected. And the cryogenics lab's cooling system could be overcharged, just for a few crucial moments. "It's risky," Maya said, more to herself than to Kira. "If I'm wrong, I'll either freeze solid or burn alive. And you?" She looked at the crystalline being. "You might shatter from the stress. You have a plan." Kira's thoughts carried a mix of hope and concern. "But you fear its cost." "Humans are adaptable," Maya replied, already beginning to modify the environmental controls. "We can survive in almost any environment with the right protection. But rapid temperature changes, especially extremes, that's usually fatal. I'm betting the same is true for the Pyraxians, maybe even more so, since they've never had to adapt to it." The lab shuddered as another wave of heat pressed against its walls. On the security feeds, Maya could see the Pyraxians had reached their level. Their fiery forms moved with predatory grace, methodically checking each room. "They know I'm here." Kira's thoughts carried an edge of ancient fear. "They can sense my cold as clearly as I can sense their heat." Maya made the final adjustments to her makeshift trap. Then let's use that against them. Your people may be peaceful, Kirura, but sometimes survival requires adaptation. Sometimes it requires fighting back. She pulled up a schematic of the station's layout. There's a junction point where the plasma vents intersect with the cryogenic cooling lines. If we can lure them there. She paused, looking at her alien companion. But I'll need your help, and it will mean leaving the safety of this lab. Kirura's crystalline form shifted, patterns of light moving beneath their transparent surface. You would risk your life to save mine, even knowing what my touch could do to you. Maya smiled behind her faceplate. That's another thing about humans, Kirura. We're really bad at walking away when someone needs help, even if helping might kill us. She checked her suit's integrity one last time. Besides, I'm a scientist. The chance to study beings made of plasma and living crystal. That's worth a few risks. She began the sequence that would slowly raise the lab's temperature, forcing them to leave. The Pyrexians hunt you because you're predictable. You run, you hide, you try to stay in the cold. But together, we can show them something they've never seen before, a prey that fights back. As the lab's temperature began to rise, Kirura moved toward the door, their crystalline form leaving trails of frost in their wake. Your species is strange, Maya of Earth. You embrace danger as if it were a friend. Not embrace, Maya corrected, following while maintaining a careful distance. We respect it, we study it, and then we figure out how to overcome it. She checked her tablet one last time. Ready? The doors slid open, releasing a blast of warming air into the lab. In the corridor beyond, orange light began to fill the space. The Pyrexians were coming. Kirura's form tensed, crystalline edges becoming sharper, more defensive. Trust in cold, Kirura's thoughts whispered in Maya's mind. Trust in change, Maya replied, her hand hovering over the control that would begin their desperate gambit. That's the real secret of survival. Together, they stepped out of the lab and into the heat-filled corridor, a human and a crystal being about to teach plasma hunters a lesson about the true nature of adaptation. The real question was, would their differences prove to be their greatest weakness or their greatest strength? Maya was betting everything on the latter. After all, if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was turning scientific impossibilities into practical solutions, even if those solutions required dancing between absolute zero and plasma fire. Heat of battle. The corridor ahead blazed with orange light as the Pyrexians approached. Their forms were mesmerizing. Twisting columns of living plasma that moved with predatory grace. Maya could feel the heat radiating from them, even through her thermal suit, while behind her, Kirura's crystalline form emanated waves of intense cold. Remember the plan, Maya whispered, though she knew Kirura could sense her thoughts. We need to lead them to Junction 47. Everything's already set up there. The nearest Pyrexian suddenly surged forward, its plasma form condensing into a more humanoid shape. When it spoke, its voice crackled like burning wood. The crystal one cannot flee. And you, warm one, you will burn for interfering. Maya stood her ground, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to run from the approaching inferno. Actually, she said, keeping her voice steady, I'm counting on that heat of yours. You might want to work on being less predictable. She slammed her hand down on her tablet's control interface. Instantly, emergency bulkheads slammed down behind the Pyrexians, cutting off their retreat. The plasma beings barely seemed to notice, their attention fixed on Kirura's cold signature. Now, Maya shouted, turning to run down the left corridor. Kirura moved with liquid grace beside her, maintaining the precise distance they had calculated, close enough to share the protection of Maya's modified thermal field, far enough to prevent fatal freezing. The Pyrexians pursued exactly as Maya had predicted. Their plasma forms stretched and flowed through the corridor, raising the temperature to nearly unbearable levels. Maya's suit sensors screamed warnings as the heat began to overwhelm its cooling systems. They're following the pattern. Kirura's thoughts reached her. increasing thermal output to force me to weaken. They have never failed with this strategy before. Maya managed a grim smile despite the sweat pouring down her face inside her helmet. That's because they've never encountered a species that understands both extremes. 3 corridors to go. Ready for Phase 2. Kirura's crystalline form pulsed with inner light, their equivalent of a nod. As they reached the next junction, Maya activated another set of commands on her tablet. Behind them, the Pyraxians suddenly found themselves hit with jets of liquid nitrogen from concealed nozzles. The plasma beings roared in surprise and pain, their forms momentarily destabilizing. But as Maya had predicted, they quickly recovered, their heat simply burning hotter to compensate. What they didn't realize was that this was exactly what she wanted. "They're increasing their thermal output," Maya said, checking the readings on her tablet as they ran. "Burning through their energy reserves faster than they can control it, just like a runaway nuclear reaction." The next corridor brought them closer to Junction 47. Maya's lungs burned from the exertion and heat, while beside her, Kirura's crystalline form was beginning to show signs of stress. Tiny cracks appearing and sealing themselves as they pushed through the thermal assault. "Your body," Kirura observed through their mental link. "It's reaching its limits. Humans are really good at pushing past their limits." Maya gasped, especially when something important is on the line. One more corridor. The Pyraxians were closing in, their plasma forms now burning white-hot with rage and expended energy. The metal walls around them had begun to soften and warp. Maya's suit was operating well beyond its safety parameters, its cooling systems struggling to keep her alive. They burst into Junction 47, a large circular chamber where multiple station systems converged. Maya staggered to the central control panel while Kirura took up position in the center of the room. The Pyraxians flowed in after them, their forms spreading out to block all exits. "Nowhere left to flee," the lead Pyraxian crackled. "Your cold will feed us for centuries, Crystal One. And you, Warm One, your interference ends now." Maya looked up from the control panel, her fingers hovering over the final sequence. "You know your biggest mistake, assuming that cold things always flee and warm things always chase. You never considered that sometimes opposites work together." She slammed down the activation sequence. Instantly, the chamber's hidden systems roared to life. From one set of vents, superheated plasma from the station's reactor core burst forth. From another, liquid nitrogen and compressed cold gas from the cryogenics lab sprayed in a carefully calculated pattern. The Pyraxians screamed as they were caught in the convergence of extreme temperatures. Their plasma forms began to flicker and destabilize, unable to maintain coherence in the rapidly shifting thermal gradients. "Kirura, now!" Maya shouted. The crystalline being's form suddenly blazed with inner light. They had been absorbing and storing cold energy since the chase began, and now they released it all at once. The temperature differentials in the chamber reached impossible levels, creating thermal shears that no single state being could endure. The Pyraxians' forms began to break apart, their living plasma unable to maintain stability under the assault of rapidly shifting extremes. They had evolved to create and control temperature gradients, but they had never adapted to survive within them. "This is impossible." The lead Pyraxian's voice distorted as its form began to dissipate. "We are the shapers of heat. We cannot be defeated by mere temperature tricks." Maya, fighting to remain conscious in her failing suit, managed one last response. "That's the thing about humans. We don't just adapt to extremes. We learn to master them. And we're really good at teaching that lesson to others." The chamber filled with light as the Pyraxians' forms finally lost cohesion, their living plasma dispersing into harmless energy that the station's systems quickly contained and neutralized. The emergency systems Maya had modified clicked off, leaving the chamber in sudden, stark silence. Kirura moved to Maya's side as she slumped against the control panel. Her suit was damaged, its cooling systems failing, but a smile played across her lips. "Your strategy." Kirura's thoughts were filled with wonder. using their own nature against them, while utilizing my cold and your understanding of thermodynamics. No one has ever defeated the Pyraxians before. Humans, Maya managed through chattering teeth as her suit's temperature regulation continued to fail. We're full of surprises, but right now, I really need to get to somewhere with a more survivable temperature range. As Karura helped her up, maintaining that crucial safe distance, Maya realized they had done more than just defeat the Pyraxians. They had proven that even the most fundamentally opposed forces could work together, if they were willing to adapt, to trust, and to see their differences as strengths rather than weaknesses. The station's systems were still damaged, and they had a lot of repairs ahead of them. But they had time now. Time to recover, to plan, and perhaps to forge a new understanding between their species. After all, if a human and a crystal being could defeat plasma hunters together, what other impossible things might they achieve? Absolute 0 hour. 3 weeks after their battle with the Pyraxians, Maya stood in Station Omega's newly repaired observation dome, watching Jupiter's massive form fill the horizon. Her breath no longer fogged in the air. The station's environmental systems had been restored to normal operating temperatures, thanks to both Earth's emergency engineering team and Krillian technological assistance. Your people worked quickly. Kyra's crystalline form reflected the giant planet's light as they stood nearby, safely contained within a specially designed cold field generator. The device was Maya's latest innovation, a portable environment that allowed Krillians to move freely through warmer areas without risk to themselves or others. We've had a lot of practice at fixing things, Maya replied, checking the cold field's readings out of habit. Though I have to admit, this is the first time we've had to repair plasma damage while accommodating crystalline life forms. The aftermath of their victory had brought more than just repair crews. Once Earth received Maya's full report about the Krillians and the Pyraxian threat, the response had been swift and comprehensive. Scientists, diplomats, and military advisors had flooded the station, all eager to establish first contact with a peaceful alien species and to learn about the hostile ones still lurking in space. The Council of Elders is optimistic. Kyra's thoughts carried a warm undertone that would have been impossible weeks ago. Your species' ability to adapt, to find solutions where we saw only obstacles, it changes everything. Already, your scientists speak of ways to terraform cold moons for our kind, while maintaining warm habitats for yourselves. Maya smiled, remembering the excitement in her colleagues' voices when they realized the implications. Humanity has always dreamed of finding others among the stars. We just never imagined our first allies would be beings who found our very body heat lethal. Perhaps that is why it works, Kara mused. We cannot take each other for granted. Every interaction requires thought, care, innovation. You humans excel at all three. A soft chime from Maya's tablet interrupted them. The latest data from the Deep Space Monitoring Network was coming in. After the Pyraxian incident, Earth had modified its detection systems to search for both extreme heat and cold signatures among the stars. The results had been surprising. 3 more Krillian refugee ships identified, Maya reported, scanning the data, and no signs of Pyraxian pursuit. Looks like word of their defeat here has spread. The hunters have become the cautious ones. They never imagined defeat was possible. Kyra's form pulsed with something like pride. Now they must face a galaxy where their prey has powerful allies. Allies who understand both heat and cold, who can turn their greatest weapon against them. Maya set down her tablet and turned to face her crystalline friend. The terror of their first meeting seemed like a distant memory now. You know, Earth's military advisors are already drawing up plans for a joint defense initiative. They're calling it Project Absolute Zero. Your people do have a gift for names. Kyra's thoughts carried amusement, though I suspect the project involves more than just military matters. Much more, Maya confirmed. We're talking about cultural exchange, scientific cooperation, shared colonization efforts. Humanity is ready to take its first steps into a larger galactic community, And we're doing it by helping a species that's fundamentally different from us in almost every way. The station hummed quietly around them as they watched one of Europa's ice storms race across the surface below. The same conditions that had once seemed harsh and limiting now represented possibility. A future where humans and Krillians could work together to explore and inhabit worlds that neither species could fully manage alone. "You never did tell me," Kyra said after a while, "why you chose to help me that first day. When you found me in the ship, I was alien, dangerous, literally lethal to touch. Most beings would have left me to my fate." Maya considered the question carefully. Humans have a saying, "The only way to have a friend is to be one." When I saw you in that pod, I didn't see an alien threat. I saw someone who needed help. Everything else, the physical differences, the survival challenges, those were just problems to be solved. And now, Kyra's form shifted, casting rainbow patterns across the domed surface. "Now we've proven that the biggest differences can become the greatest strengths," Maya replied. "Your people have lived in the cold reaches of space for millennia, accumulating knowledge we can barely imagine. We've spent our history learning to adapt, to innovate, to find ways through seemingly impossible challenges. Together, I'd say we're just getting started." As if to emphasize her point, another alert chimed. The first Krillian diplomatic vessel was approaching Earth, carrying their highest council members. They would be housed in a specially constructed facility in Antarctica, where human and Krillian representatives would begin formal negotiations for their species' shared future. "Your warmth still amazes me," Kyra observed. "Not your physical heat, but your spirit. Your willingness to reach across the void, to help those who are different, to find ways to coexist where none seemed possible." Maya watched as the ice storm below intensified, thinking about how far they'd come from that first desperate encounter. Maybe that's humanity's real gift to the galaxy. Not our technology or our adaptability, but our determination to find connections even in the most unlikely places, to turn opposites into allies, to prove that the space between absolute zero and plasma fire is full of possibilities if you're brave enough to explore them. The storm raged on below them, ice and wind dancing across Europa's surface. But inside Station Omega, warmth and cold had found their balance, just as two vastly different species have found their way to friendship. It was just the beginning of cultural exchange, of scientific advancement, of a new chapter in human history. And somewhere out in the darkness between the stars, the news was spreading. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not with weapons or conquest, but with innovation, adaptation, and an unwavering determination to prove that even the coldest spaces could be bridged by understanding. The impossible had become possible. The unbridgeable had been bridged. And in doing so, both humans and Krillians had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that in a universe of infinite diversity, the greatest strength lies not in our similarities, but in how we choose to overcome our differences.